is awesome, always has been awesome. And from what we understand, this year is going to even be better. A few little things to keep in mind. The staff of SysDream, who is behind everything here, is here to help you and make your conference really, really good. Layla is here somewhere, and we've got Evangelia, she is here somewhere. Rosa, Sebastian, there's an entire crew to help make Hack in Paris the event that you want it to be, and so you can get what you need out of it. A couple of other small things for your badges. During lunch hour, here's Layla, so if you need anything, it's all her fault. There she is. Your badge will get you a huge discount at Earl's Sandwich, 10%. But apparently, if you go with use her name, it's 30%. No, you get 10% at Earl's, and it's a fast place to eat a sandwich of moderate quality. It's okay. No offense, Earl's. During lunch, we're going to be preparing feedback forms so that you'll be able to give us some information as to what you like, what you don't like, how to make things better for next year, and give us your ideas. So those will be distributed to you after lunch when you return. During Hack in Paris, some audiences around the world sit there and nod and listen. We want you to engage. The speakers here are some of the best in the world. So engage, ask questions. If there's not always time up here, all of us are here to help you talk about things. There is no such thing as a stupid question, unless somebody tells you it's really stupid. So please engage with all of our speakers. And lastly, tomorrow afternoon, we are holding a debate, which some of you may know about, and it is about global surveillance. Ed Snowden, the NSA, and all of the global players as to what is going on. And we have some incredible people that are going to be up here looking at all of the various views, and you're going to participate in that debate and be part of it to answer your questions and argue with some of the panelists that are up here. And we've got somebody who's going to play the role of the NSA, privacy advocates, somebody from the Gendarmerie here in France, and an ex-whistleblower from MI5 from the United Kingdom. So it's going to be quite an event, and I encourage you to be here for it, and especially since there will be an open bar. Okay, that got him going. All right, I also have the honor of introducing me. I'm Wynn Schwartow, and I get to give the opening keynote, including all of the administrivia. And we're going to talk a little bit about information warfare and the future, and how this community has some real obligations to participate, maybe in some new ways that we haven't quite been doing enough of. And I'm going to challenge you to get maybe involved in more areas than you currently are. Now, I grew up in the old days, long time ago. That was my first DEF CON, and my first beer, apparently, as well. But I grew up an analog engineer. Anybody know what analog is? Oh, 4 people in the room. I grew up an analog engineer. We didn't have bits and bytes. And the first computer I built was actually an analog computer that my mother and father bought me for $7. And it sort of worked. But it started teaching me a great deal about engineering at a very, very young age. And it turns out that I did not know this until many years later. Everybody knows who Richard Stallman is, right? He was my neighbor. I grew up with the kid, didn't even think about it for years, and he taught me how to use transistors and make amplifiers and radios when we were 7 years old. So I grew up in a very, very different world. We didn't have kits. We had to build everything on our own. And the type of hacking we did back then is similar more to what some of the DIY, do-it-yourselfers are doing, where the parts don't yet exist. So over the years, I was involved in the audio and video industry, television and movies, and it was all analog. No bits, no bytes. Every time we tried to make automation work, it failed. And we had to, quote unquote, hack systems together, manually do things to make them work. And in many cases, that's what we're going through today with some technologies. And this is where some of the challenge is going to come from. But first, I want to go back a little bit. I got involved in security in 1983. So I'm kind of old about all this stuff. And during the 80s, we were all kind of learning, what is this security stuff? What does it mean? Does it really even matter? So a number of us got together over the years in the 80s and started making some predictions about where things were going to go. And I wrote this book to start talking about some crazy ideas that people did not believe. People did not believe that we had anything to worry about. For those of you who may know Al Gore, the former Vice President of the United States, he said, we should give the internet to everybody. Security and privacy will not be a problem. And that was in 1990. And many of us had a big problem with that because he was saying it's great and it's perfect and don't worry about it. Your government is here to help you. So we've got to deal with Congress, and lots of us were testifying and talking to them about the future that we saw. And we saw, yes, the internet's going to be great and we're going to have a lot of fun, but there's going to be some problems. And some of those problems are what we're seeing today. Malware. Nobody believed that malware was going to be a problem. No, the internet will take care of it. It's all fixable. Don't worry about it. Because DARPA, US government, did the original designs. No worries. The concept of chipping. Back in the 1980s, we talked about building malware into silicon. But they said we were crazy. It'll never happen. Has it happened yet? Anybody go to China often and bring back silicon? We're seeing the silicon chipping going on, and it's ending up finally, the US government cares because it's ending up in our military systems. So suddenly, if the weapons won't work, now we care about it. We're going to talk a little bit about HERF, high energy radio frequencies, and some of the ramifications of that. We talked about back then what I called cyber civil disobedience, using the internet for politics. Congress said to me, why would they ever do that? The Congress people actually said, Mr. Schwartow, why would the bad guys ever want to use the internet? That was what we were fighting, and some of you remember this, that we were trying to talk about things that were unpopular. We talked about denial of service attacks, and they tried to convince us the internet was designed to be resilient. It will protect itself. That's how it was designed. How's that all going for us these days? And then there were the political issues as well that we were trying to raise. Very, very unpopular. The economy is a national security asset. We talked about critical infrastructures back in the 80s. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. And you're going to be hearing some interesting things throughout this convention on that as well. Vigilantism, this concept of strikebacks. We were arguing that corporations and private individuals will have similar technological power that governments do. No, you're crazy. It's never going to happen. What's the world we live in today? Well, the world we live in today, there's a lot of convergence, and one of the things that I've been pushing the concept of for many years is security is not only about your bits and bytes. That is only a small part of it. What is the single biggest problem we have in security? And it's a dirty four-letter word. What is it? User. That's it, user. It's a dirty four-letter word when it comes to security. And one of the things that we have ignored, and many of you went through, we try to think about how we're in the cyber world. Well, yeah, we are. But how much of the internet is cyber versus physical? And when we consider how much is copper, it's fiber, it's servers, the internet is physical. Yet we've been treating it all too often as a purely digital cyber environment. There's another component to it, which is the physical, and then obviously the people component. Some of you may get involved with the dirty four-letter word users. We all have the problems with our users, whether it's at home, our parents, or executives. How are those executives doing at work for you when it says, all security applies to everybody but me? Anybody see that? Of course. So the people component, the cyber component, and the physical component require more of a combination to be effective. And I'm going to challenge you to think about some of the things that we need to look at for the future, under the premise that if we, as the community, don't really get more proactively involved in hacking future technologies now, we will continue to lose. We have opportunity. The skill sets in this room and in the community worldwide are tremendous. Now, I'm not saying don't worry about JavaScript. I'm not saying don't worry about SQL injections. But in many ways, I could argue that that's old stuff. Okay, let's just grind it out, do the research. But I want to take a look at what's going to happen 5, 10, and 20 years from now and start preparing for what's going to happen, because we've already lived through governments saying it'll never happen, don't worry about it. So some of the things we have to keep in mind is that technology has always been weaponized. We've always found a way to take any technology and turn it into a killing machine or make it part of the military. Now, the internet, we talked about this back in the 80s, how we're going to weaponize it. And again, we were crazy. We were out of our minds that it was never, ever going to happen. The concept of cyber terrorism, the concept of cyber war, whether you like the words or not, we have nation states, we have terrorist organizations using the same technologies for their purposes. Would it be different today if 25 years ago somebody had listened? What would be the difference? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that somehow it would be different. Would it be better technologically? Would we have accelerated TCP/IP into a more secure protocol? What would we have done? I don't know, but I do know that we ignored the problem. Thus, the reason we're in the mess we're in today. Even the new technologies that have come out since the 1970s, these are the same technologies that we use, that we want to use for privacy, the bad guys use for anonymity. And this was an argument back with PGP, Phil Zimmerman in the early days, late 80s, early 1990s. Same thing with scalable computing and massive MPP work we have distributed processing. What kind of power does that mean the bad guys have got? So you have to keep in mind that this is all about life cycles. And this is another analog function. It's a curve. Right now, see if this will work, we've got some stuff, and we're kind of fairly mature in an awful lot of the technologies that we have deployed today. When we were talking about security problems in the 80s, we were more down in this part of the world, but don't worry about security. It doesn't matter. Everything will be fine. So I'm going to argue and ask you to get involved with some of these new technologies down at this point. Start hacking them early. Hack them hard before we start seeing the growth in the curves that we have in the past. Anybody ever been on the phone with a computer and had a long conversation with it before you realized it was a computer? In the US, this is happening all the time. and you call up Dell, you call up Verizon phone company, and you start having a conversation, and at some point, something clicks inside your head. This is wrong. Something's not quite right. And then you ask the question, are you a human? So now the chat bots are programmed, of course, sir, I am a human. Can you pass the Turing test? So having conversations with computers and trying to imply the Turing test, and now that the Turing test has been passed sometime in the last few weeks, we're going to see increasing levels of chatbots, not just for sex and porn and phone calls, but it's going to go far beyond that. And right now, I'm getting at home some number of phone calls every day into my office from computers that are exceedingly well done, that it is almost impossible to tell initially whether it is a computer I'm having a conversation with or is it a real human. So there's a certain concept of social engineering the computer that is calling you. How can we abuse this earlier before the chatbots, the technology, the people that are promoting all of this, find ways to bypass all of the mental capacities of the average user? These are the people that we need to protect. We know how to mess with these things. We know how to challenge the technology. But isn't part of our job as well to protect the other 7 billion people who don't get it, who do not understand it? There's only a few million of us around the world that really understand this stuff. And this is probably the biggest example of what went wrong. 2007, iPhone came out. It was awesome. It was cool. It was great. How much security is in an iPhone? How much? Any? Daryl? None. We introduced a technology that now has over 2 billion devices out there, and we as the community didn't challenge it early enough. Again, they said, MDM, you'll be fine, it's plenty secure. Oh, we have local crypto, plenty secure. You have a 4-digit PIN to protect your privacy. You're plenty secure. That's what they have been telling our industry. That's what the vendors have been saying, and no offense to the vendors in the rear, but some of you may have heard Mobile Iron, the MDM company, got owned last week. They got owned. Take a look, it's all out there in the news, and it happened in the United Kingdom. Certain portions in the mobile space, we have again allowed the people who said, don't worry about it, to win. And what's happened? And you're going to be hearing some mobile talks here over the next couple of days that are going to get into the malware explosion. And we're going to see what? Exactly the same thing we saw happen with first-generation computers, second-generation, first-generation networks, and a lot of you have grown up through this, and some of you are new to the field. This is a total repeat of the same failures that we, as the community, could say it was our fault for not hacking it early enough. The fastest growing technology in the history of the planet, and it's completely insecure. Whose fault is that? I think that we as the community have a responsibility to, again, to look at technology, hack early, and hack it hard. These mobile devices, how many of you have built-in geolocation in your mobile device that would set a separate set of rules depending upon where you are? Now, some of you, I know there's a guy in the back you'll hear from tomorrow, he goes to China fairly often. How many of you, show of hands, would bring your mobile phone to China? All right, there's one idiot. There's 2 idiots. All right, good morning. Should or should not the mobile technology be treated with the same sort of respect that we would treat our enterprise? We're tying them into businesses. Yet, because of some of the threats and the native insecurities that we have known about now for over 7 years, we still have done very, very little to make this technology work based upon location. We use GPS so we can shop and eat. We don't use GPS based upon risk of where I may be, or where Jason may be in China, or the rules in the Middle East are very, very culturally different. And there's certain things that you just do not want to have on your phone in some countries. So what do? We have an extra phone, a China phone, a Middle East phone. We have bypassed the entire concept, and again, I think this is a failure of treating mobile devices like they are. Is it our fault? I criticize the IT industry and the security industry for allowing some of this to happen under the guise of, don't worry, it's fine, it's secure enough. And I have a problem with the phrase, it is secure enough, and I hope you do as well. The Internet of Terror, you're going to be hearing about some of this over the next couple days. The next speaker, Paul, he's going to be talking about the angle on the power grid. We're tying all of this crap together. By the end of the decade, somewhere between 20 and 50 billion intelligent endpoints. That doesn't include RFIDs or chip cards or all of the other things that we plug in and out of the systems. How much security is being planned for these? How much? Anybody know how much security is being planned? Paul's going to cover some of this with the power angles of it. Internet of Things is about how do I get my refrigerator to call the grocery store, to tell my car to automatically drive by, and my food is ready for pickup and paid for. Convenience. Last night we were having a whole discussion about this. It's about convenience. How do we as the community help change people's mindsets that convenience doesn't at all mean security, and in most cases it means insecurity. Again, part of the IT failure and part of the hacking culture and the security culture, we haven't done our jobs in getting the word out enough. How do you hack a car? Anybody been involved with car hacking yet? In the U.S., I believe it's the University of Ohio, they've actually started a hacking school on cars. And there's some research that is coming out on it that basically say, do you really want to drive a car hands-free, let the car do all of the driving for you, and now they're talking about removing the steering wheel? Are we ready for this technology to be deployed on the streets? How much security is actually built into these things? And right now we know that OnStar has been hacked, but we waited 15 years. Why didn't we hack it sooner? So I'm encouraging, again, some of these technologies, start hacking the bejesus out of them now. Some of the protocols involved with the Internet of Things is atrocious. It makes TCP/IP look secure. It is so bad in many cases. Take a look at some of these technologies. You're going to be hearing from Paul and some others about ICS and SCADA systems. Again, something we've ignored. These technologies go back 30 years, 50 years, in some cases in the US, more than 100 years. Can you hack ICS and SCADA? Hell yeah. Why have we not done something about it? It's back to those three words: apathy, arrogance, and ignorance, and people not caring and not believing it'll ever occur. We should know better than that. I'm not going to take anything away from Paul, but we had a good debate last night about, do I even want to be connected to the grid anymore at all? How do I get off the grid? He pointed out a law that's, I believe, in the US, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, that in some places you are required by law to connect to the grid, even if you have your own power plant. And that is the opposite of what most of us, I hope, would think. Paul's going to get involved with a lot of this area for us. Again, I grew up in the analog world, and we did a lot of remote recording. We were in the recording studios doing concerts. And one of the biggest problems that we had was called EMI, electromagnetic interference. And has anybody ever picked up a radio station on their teeth? It happens from time to time, especially for old guys like me with the old fillings. And they turn into diodes, which means that then it's rectifying and picking up the high-frequency electromagnetic waves. It's an interference. Now, I'm going to put on my bad guy hat. If I take high power types of electromagnetic interference, how much damage can I do as a bad guy? Has anybody ever played with cell phone jammers? You guys got to get more evil. We need you to be more evil. The cell phone jammer is real simple. You can build them for, what was it, Dara? We talked about it was like $20, and you put together some stuff and zap. All the cell phones are toast. Back in the old days, we used to be able to actually force interference. And remember, we used to have TVs with antennas. How do you mess with the neighbor's TV? Well, we did it because we were kids and we were just screwing around. So when we start looking at the capability of influencing electronics today, and our 99.9% of our current infrastructure is susceptible to electromagnetic interference of varying strengths, and it's not terribly difficult to do. On the lower right, that's a military system that's used for high-power microwaves and system jamming in warfare. The lower left, $500, takes down computers for a kilometer. Are the bad guys ever going to use this? How much protection have we done? How much hacking have we done in the community to understand what the military is not telling us, because largely this stuff is all very, very heavily classified. Let's unclassify it. Let's bring it out into the open the way it should be. Here's some of the schematics. Let's go off and build some of these things. And again, this is all analog technology. Don't have to worry about JavaScript or anything. You don't have to be precise. In these cases, you just have to make a boatload of noise electromagnetically to screw with systems. How many of you have been hacking UAVs yet? Anybody? All right, we got one. Why aren't we hacking UAVs? Now in the US, I don't know what's happening with the rules over here. There's certain height limits that you can only fly your UAV 700 feet, or in some areas maybe 1,000 feet off the ground. Now tell me if I'm wrong here, but bad guys will follow the law, right? Are we going to deliver Domino's pizza? Yeah. Amazon's going to start playing with this as a delivery system. It's happening all over, and now we're talking about deploying a mechanical system that's functionally analog, using electromagnetic waves in order to control it. Where's the security? Do we want these things falling on the streets and highways? What's going to happen? The lawyers are going to get involved and start banning the very technology that's going to help us if we approached it correctly. Are there dual-channel, out-of-band communication, fail-safe overrides in any of this? Nope. Nope. Should there be? Probably. I'm not enough of a designer, but you guys are smart enough. How should we design this technology with security at step number one before we start deploying the hell out of it like we did with mobile phones? This is going to be the next mobile phone with the sheer numbers of them coming out. Or do we just end up having them all banned? No, you can't have UAVs anymore, which means that the criminals will never use them, right? How's that worked for us in the past? So let's take the concept of ultra miniature Bugs. We figured out about 7 years ago how birds and bugs and bees actually flew. Finally figured out how the aerodynamics worked, and we were able to duplicate it. So on the lower right, it's a guy's finger. That is an autonomous UAV with some amount of intelligence. You don't need a lot of intelligence in many of these because of the concept of swarming. And the swarming, again, is an analog concept of creating distributed intelligence, kind of like the Borg, if you will. And if you'll do a little bit of research, so a lot of the robotics that are being currently designed are taking that same approach. Looking at simple rule sets, very, very simple rule sets, and applying them across tens of thousands and ultimately on the nanoscale, tens of billions of devices. Are we hacking it yet? No, why not? Because the utility, the convenience is what comes first. And we're going to deploy these things, and then we're going to have to solve it, whether it's in 10 years or 20 years. The other problem that you have with these is now they're starting to make them look like biological elements, real bugs. So you go into your board meeting, you go into a super secret meeting at the office. There's a fly on the wall. What is it? Is it biological? Or is it an audio-video interception surveillance device run by government of your choice or competitor of your choice? How are we going to know unless we start looking at the downside risk of all of this new technology that's coming out? Because right now, who's running all this? This is all being done largely by government-funded research because there's a lot of money involved. It's now in academia. And what does this sound like? This sounds like the development of the internet all over again. An unregulated, not security-based approach to technological development. It's going to get worse. We've now got some great technology as we start to understand neural pathways, how the brain works, and everything connects. I don't know much about any of that, but I do know that we got prosthetics going where they're able now to make the prosthetics with the sensors built into them convince the brain that that prosthetic is real. We've learned enough about the neocortex and how to do that. What's the downside risk here? Has anybody been hacking these yet? Or what about the ones that are taking now with the brain implants, allowing quadriplegics and paraplegics to be able to feel and touch and interact with their physical environment using fundamentally insecure technology? Why aren't we hacking this stuff at the same time? At the beginning of the life cycle, the early part of the life cycle, instead of waiting for it to get deployed, and then some fools start messing around in ways that now are going to have a direct impact upon life. So all of this, that's not me, by the way, all of this really scares me because I've lived it. I've seen it. Some of you have seen a lot of this with me over the years. We have just made the mistakes, and that really scares me that we're going to do it again. We're going to make the same mistakes over and over again unless we in the community start saying, whoa, we got to point out early in the development and research cycles. Not wait for Java version 6.0. What about Java version 0.5? What do we do there? No, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It'll come out and it'll work, and we'll fix it in a patch. We have this incredible patch mindset that will fix it afterwards. In the record business, there's a parallel. We would go out and record a band. And if there were errors, the phrase we used was, it's okay, we'll fix it in the mix. meaning we get back to the studio and we can then repair the bad notes or whatever it is. And today we're seeing exactly the same thing. That's why some audio just sucks. It's awful. We'll fix it later. Same thing here. We're now going to be basically saying, and I'm going to go back to the mobile because that's the one that really set me off. We're going to fix it later. If we don't get fixing things a lot earlier, we're going to have more and more of the same, and it's going to get increasingly worse. There's been an issue and big debate last night, and we're going to be talking about this during the NSA Snowden global surveillance. Is privacy, do we have any? Does it even exist right now? Or was privacy one of those things that because we chose to ignore security, we have allowed it to disappear from our lives out of convenience? Did we make that decision as the IT community, as part of the security community, for the convenience of 7 billion people? What is the downside of this? And you're going to be hearing a lot of this at the debate tomorrow afternoon. Do we have any privacy or not? It bothers the hell out of me in many ways. Bothers other people a whole hell of a lot more than me in some cases. And then, what does the average user think? The average user doesn't know. And again, that's part of our failure. Carrington effect. Anybody know about the Carrington effect? In 1859, is that the correct year? Yeah. There was a huge solar storm. The telegraph networks had just started being deployed all across the United States, UK, some here in Europe. Carrington effect discharged what is called a CME, coronal mass ejection, which is basically a solar flare larger than the planet Earth. When it hit Earth, it fried out the entire telegraph system. Now, for those of you who may have followed, have you been watching the solar activity and predictions from NASA and ESA over the last couple of years? There was a solar flare that missed the Earth about 3 months ago that would have taken out satellites. They're still predicting more and more of this, and if you look at some of the solar activities, there's a good chance something's coming. What happens if one hits the Earth today? Anybody know? What happens if the CME hits the planet? You don't know? Okay, first the satellites go. What's the next thing to go? Power transformers. A planet without power. We haven't planned for things that we knew. Is there a way? There are some answers to this, and the answers to this problem actually are old, antique, analog electrical engineering. And Paul will probably, you're going to get into some of this perhaps, Paul, about how to protect against something like this, but it requires, number one, an admission that it can happen. Number two, that the devastation it would cause is pretty damn bad. And number three, it would require, which won't happen, cooperation between power companies, governments, and users, because there is a defense. And when one starts coming our way, we will have roughly 3 days to protect the entire planet. If anybody wants to know the answer, I'll give it to you later. So my answers for all of this, these are not hard answers. These are things hopefully to get you to think. We got to take the lead. We really need to take the lead in this. And this community should be fearless, absolutely fearless when it comes to attacking new technologies, not out of our being evil that we were accused of 30 years ago, but out of proactive defense for the things that we know are coming. Simplicity. Where is the simplicity? We now go to complexity. Why? Because, no offense to the vendors, Version 2 is always better than version 1. And you have to upgrade. And how do those go? Did anybody have I just had an Android upgrade that absolutely killed everything on my phone. I had to rebuild it all. We got to take the lead on these things. Graceful degradation. How many of your clients, how many of your organizations have a way that if a significant piece of your network is corrupted, do you have a way to shut it down without hurting your company? Was it designed with redundancy? I'm not talking a generator and backup. I'm talking about true redundancy, communication, out-of-band mechanisms to be able to have long-term survivability in mission-critical areas. There's very, very few of these. And again, we're doing it for convenience. Make it easy. We're giving users, up there in the upper right, what do they need? More of what's in the lower. Word, I use Word every single day. There's, 27,000 menus and options inside of Word. How many do I use? Times Roman and an indent. And maybe I'll change the font size. But the complexity that we are building into these things is getting absurd. It started out that these were telephones. Then they were texting machines. Now they're replacing our entire computer infrastructure. And we're adding more and more and more complexity at the hardware level, the firmware level, and the software level, not to mention what's going on over the airwaves. I think it is our responsibility as the community to push harder and harder and harder with these new emerging technologies before they are deployed. It's our responsibility to show the dangers of them early on and not to buy into the bullshit that comes out of the vendors and some researchers who say, don't worry, you'll be fine. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm here. If I have some time, I'll answer a couple questions. Do I have time for any questions, Layla, or no? I don't see any hands up. I don't see any hands up. All right, Jason. Uh-oh, he's going to shoot me.
Okay. So
all right, Jason.
I noticed that you said your thing about China and bringing your cell phone over. So you're saying that basically when your cell phone is in the U.S., it's perfectly safe from monitoring from governments, right? It's like, so your mobile device is totally perfectly okay in the U.S. to be used.
What I said, Jason, if you had actually paid attention, was...
I slept a little bit, but not much.
I said that cell phone and GPS should be based upon risk. I did not say whose risk where. Risk is your choice, your company's choice to determine whether, you may not want to use a cell phone in the U.S. at all, depending upon your political beliefs. Maybe you want to go back to a Nokia. Anybody remember Nokia? Yeah, they used to be a phone company. So no, I appreciate your point, but no, it's a risk-based analysis that we are not paying attention to. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, again, thank you very much, and our next speaker is Paul, and he is absolutely awesome, and he's going to take you down a couple of the roads, hopefully of some of the terror that I've shown. Thank you again.